Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be reading Kant's Prolegoma, preamble on the peculiarities of sign or metaphysical cognition. Now, what we're going to be doing in this reading this time is focusing specifically on syntheticity and also on intuition. Because what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to figure out is the relationship between Kant's reformulation of the sources of metaphysics as a result from Hume's skepticism. So let's see and let's follow where we have, as we can see, synthetical judgments are here and where the intuitions are as well. One of the sources of metaphysics. If it becomes desirable to formulate any cognition as science, it will be necessary first to determine accurately those peculiar features which no other science has in common with it, constituting its character, otherwise the boundaries of all science becomes confused, and none of them can be treated thoroughly according to its nature. The characteristic of a science may consist of a simple difference of object, or of the sources of cognition, or of the kind of cognition, or perhaps all three conjointly. On this, therefore, depends the idea of a possible science and of its territory. First, as concerns the sources of metaphysical cognition, its very concept implies that they cannot be empirical. Its principles, including not only its maxims, but its basic notions, must never be derived from experience. It must not be physical, but metaphysical knowledge, knowledge lying beyond experience. It can, therefore, have for its basis neither external experience, which is the source of physics proper, nor internal, which is the basis of empirical psychology. It is therefore a priori knowledge coming from pure understanding and pure reason. But so far, metaphysics would not be distinguishable from pure mathematics. It must there be called pure philosophical cognition. For the reason, or for the meaning of this term, I refer to the Critique of Pure Reason, where the distinction between these two employments of the reason is sufficiently explained, so far concerning the sources of metaphysical cognition. Of the distinction between analytic and synthetical judgments in general, the peculiarity of its source demands that metaphysical cognition must consist of nothing but logical, but a priori judgments. Whatever it be their origin or their logical form, there is a distinction in judgments as to their content, according to which they are either merely explicative, adding nothing to the content of the cognition, or expansive, increasing the given cognition. The former may be called analytic, and the latter synthetic. So synthetical is going to expand the actual knowledge of the bodies of knowledge. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with two different types of knowledge, what we would also call amplative. So we have synthetical judgments. Analytical judgments express nothing in the predicate but what has already been actually thought in the concept of the subject, though not so distinctively or with the same full consciousness. When I say all bodies are extended, I have not amplified in the least my concept of body, but have only analyzed it, as extension was really thought to belong to that concept before the judgment was made, though it was not expressed. This judgment is therefore analytical. On the contrary, this judgment, all bodies have weight, contains in its predicate something not actually thought in the general concept of the body. It amplifies my knowledge by adding something to my concept and must therefore be called synthetical. So the common principle of all analytical judgments is the law of non-contradiction. All analytical judgments depend wholly on the law of non-contradiction. I'll say this again because this is extremely important. All analytical judgments depend wholly on the law of non-contradiction and are in the nature a priori cognitions. Whether the concepts that supply them with matter be empirical or not. For the predicate of an affirmative analytical judgment is already contained in the concept of the subject, of which it cannot be denied without contradiction. So, if I say, for example, that bachelors are married men. Then that's a contradiction, because bachelors by definition are unmarried men. So for the predicate of an affirmative analytical judgment is already contained in the subject. So when I'm looking at bachelors, for example, I don't need to go out and look at all of the bachelors in the world and ask them, are they married? Are they single? Because I know by definition, if you're a bachelor, you're single. It is the same way its opposite is necessarily denied of the subject in an analytical but negative judgment by the same law of contradiction. Such is the nature of the judgments. All bodies are extended, no bodies are unextended. For this very reason, all analytical judgments are a priori, even when the concepts are empirical. As for example, gold is a yellow metal. For to know this, I require no experience beyond my concept of gold as a yellow metal. It is, in fact, the very concept, and I need only analyze it without looking beyond it elsewhere. Synthetical judgments require a different principle from the law of contradiction. There are synthetical a posteriori judgments of empirical origin, but there are also others which are proved to be certain a priori, and which spring from the understanding and reason. Yet they both agree in this, that they cannot possibly spring from the principle of analysis. They cannot possibly spring from the principle of analysis or the law of contradiction alone. They require a quite different principle, though from whatever they may be deduced, they must be subject to the law of non-contradiction, which must never be violated, even though everything cannot be deduced from it. I shall first classify the synthetical judgments. Empirical judgments are always synthetical, for it would be absurd to base analytical judgments on experience, as our concepts suffice for the purpose without requiring any testimony from experience. That body is extended is a judgment established a priori, and not an empirical judgment. For before appealing to experience, we already have the condition of the judgment in the concept, from which we have but to elicit the predicate according to the law of contradiction, and thereby to become conscious of the necessity of the judgment, which experience could not even teach us. 2. Mathematical judgments are synthetical. This fact seems hitherto to have altogether escaped the observation of those who have analyzed human reason. It even seems directly opposed to all their conjectures, though incontestably certain and most important in its consequence, for as it was found that the conclusion of mathematicians all proceed according to the law of contradiction, as demanded by apodictic certainty. Men persuade themselves that the fundamental principles were known from the same law. This was a great mistake, for a synthetical proposition can indeed be comprehended according to the law of contradiction, but only by presupposing another synthetical proposition from which it follows, but never in itself. First of all, we must observe that all proper mathematical judgments are a priori, not empirical, because they carry with them necessity, which cannot be obtained from experience. But if this be not conceded to me, very good, I shall confine my assertion to pure mathematics, the very notion of which implies that it contains pure a priori and not empirical cognitions. It might at first be thought that the proposition 7 plus 5 equals 12 is a mere analytical judgment, following from the concept of the sum of 7 and 5 according to the law of contradiction. But on closer examination, it appears that the concept of sum of 7 plus 5 contains merely their union in a single number, without its being at thought what the particular number is that unites them. The concept of 12 is by no means thought by merely thinking of combination of 7 and 5, and analyze this problem sum as we may, we shall not discover the concept of discover the 12 in the concept. We must go beyond these concepts by calling to our aid some concrete image, and Shawon, either of our fingers or 5 points, has it in his arithmetic, and we must add successively the units of the 5, given in some concrete image, and Shawon, to the concept of 7. Hence, our concept is really amplified by the proposition 7 plus 12. And we add to the first and second not thought in it. Arithmetical judgments are therefore synthetical and not more plainly according, as we take large numbers. For in such cases, it is clear that, however closely we analyze our concepts without calling visual images to our aid, we can never find the sum by such mere dissection. So this is where we get mathematical judgments. They are all synthetical. According to the law of non-contradiction. I confine myself assertion to pure mathematics. I might at first be thought that the proposition 7 plus 5 equals 12 is a mere analytical judgment, following from the concept of the sum of 7 and 5, according to the law of contradiction. But on closer examination, it appears that the concept of the sum, 7 plus 5, contains merely their union in a single number, without its being at all thought, but the peculiar number that unites them. The concept of 12 is by no means thought merely by combination of 7 and 5. An analysis of this possible sum we shall not discover 12 in the concept. We must go beyond these concepts by calling to our aid some concrete image. And we must add successively the units of the 5 given in the sum concrete image and shown to the concept of 7. Hence, our concept is really amplified by the proposition. Arithmetical judgments are therefore synthetical, and the more plainly according we take the large numbers, for in such case it is clear that, however closely we analyze our concepts without calling visual images to our aid, we can never find the sum by such mere dissection. And then Kant goes on and talks about geometry. So, the essential and distinguishing feature of pure mathematical cognition among all other a priori cognitions is that it cannot at all proceed from concepts, but only by means of construction of concepts. So we have a distinction between concepts on the one hand and construction of the concepts. As therefore, in its judgment, it must proceed beyond the concept to that which its corresponding visualization contains. These judgments neither can nor ought to arise analytically by dissecting the concepts, but are all synthetical. I cannot refrain from pointing out the disadvantage resulting to philosophy from the neglect of this easy and apparently insignificant observation. Hume being prompted, a task worthy of a philosopher to cast his eye over the whole field of a priori cognitions, in which human understanding claims such mighty possessions, heedlessly severed from it a whole, and indeed its most valuable provenance, vis-a-vis pure mathematics. For he thought its nature, or so to speak, the state constituents of this empire depend on totally different principles, namely on the law of contradiction alone. And although he did not divide judgments in this manner formally and universally as I've done here, what he said was equivalent to this: that mathematics contains only analytic, but metaphysical synthetic a priori judgments. In this, however, he was greatly mistaken, and the mistake has decidedly injurious effect upon the whole concept. So here we have 21 pages of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it here now. I've got some stuff to do, but I will come back to this question of how mathematics is possible. Okay, see you next time.